Alright, so I just want to talk through this exemplar, just kind of from start to finish, just so you know all the little bits and things that go with it. Also, yeah, you would have been sent this out, and yeah, hopefully it helps. So we always have to start off with our question. So in the actual assessment, the assessment will be split into two parts. The first part will just be writing your question. So in your question, remember we always start off with I wonder if. You need to have your two groups, so girls and boys. The phrase tends to what you're measuring, so we're talking about the money they spend, and the population, which in this case is the Freiburg High School ball. Okay, so overall trying to answer a question about just Freiburg High School and their ball. So then you create your graph on NZ Grapher. If you need any help with that, I can create another video for that, just let me know. And then we move on to looking at analysis. Now I've discussed all the aspects here, but you only actually need to do 3 in the assessment to save you a bit of time. So I'll kind of go through them, and in this assessment we're also going to look at some aspects of excellence as well. So if we're comparing these two, in my sample I can see the median amount of money spent for girls tends to be higher than boys. I give the evidence, which is for merit. And then for excellence, I go on to ask the question, what does this mean? And is this expected, essentially? So it means that girls tend to spend more money on the ball than boys. And this is expected because stuff like dresses and shoes can be really expensive. So I'm just giving some reason. You don't have to know the answer. You just have to kind of suggest reasons, as long as it's reasonable. So I've given a reason here, such as dresses can be hugely expensive in price, whereas maybe boys already have some of the aspects in their wardrobe, like a shirt and a tie, or maybe they borrow it from someone. For spread, remember we're talking about the interquartile range, so how big that middle 50% is. So you calculate that for the girls, and you calculate it for the boys, and I said that there's a difference of $260 between them. So remember, when we're comparing our features, it is really important to make sure they are in context. So I'm forever talking about girls, boys, and the amount spent on the ball, and if I'm ever giving the numbers, I'm giving them the units, which in this case is dollar signs. And then I go on to talk about excellence. So this can be expected because there's a lot more variation what a girl could buy for the ball, whereas boys there's less variation. For instance, girls can buy stuff like dresses, shoes, accessories that go with it, and may often do through like online stores and stores that may be more expensive. Whereas the variation occurs, some girls may borrow dresses from a friend or family, or maybe they just already have a dress and they just need to pick up a couple of things, so they're going to have low cost. So there's huge variation from girls that spend a whole lot of money on the ball to girls that don't spend a whole lot of money. Whereas boys, well, it's kind of what do you wear to a ball typically for a boy? Well, you typically would just wear a suit. Now you either have a suit or you don't. And if you're going to buy a suit, you're going to buy it generally, not always, from places such as Hallenstein's. So looking at shape, I've just included the shape graph here. You don't actually have to do this, but in the actual assessment it can be helpful to draw like a pencil line just to get the idea of the overall shape of the graph. I've just kind of done it to kind of help you understand. So you'll notice here that this side here, the right hand side on both of them is much bigger, so it's a right skewed distribution for both of the groups. So I'm comparing the distributions of those two groups. So as I say here, when it comes to money, often it often is a right skewed distribution. For instance, if you think about how much people earn in the world, most people would earn a similar amount, especially like in New Zealand, but then there's a few people that earn a whole lot more than the rest, giving it that right skewed shape. And same with lots of other things in money as well, such as the amount spent on things, as we can see in this graph here. So we kind of expect a right skewed distribution. In terms of the amount spent, it shows that lots of individuals are spending about the same amount. Like for instance, boys are spending kind of anywhere between $100 to $300. Girls, it's kind of about the same, but for girls there's a whole lot more girls that spend more than that amount. But typically the majority is in this kind of, or a large chunk is in this lower part here. Next, so I gave some evidence of this. So the girls' median is $310, but we can see there are 6 individuals here that spent more than 3 times the median amount, which is a huge difference. Whereas boys, we can see there's a clear peak, a clear mode. So this peak is the mode of around $200. Now, I give some reasons for why that might be the case. So that's again, excellence is giving reasons. So like, why might this happen, or is this expected? And this kind of is expected, because if you think about where are you going to go buy a suit, well, typically a lot of boys would go to Hallenstein's, and they often have deals for around $200 for a whole suit. So that kind of explains that point here. And they probably already have some shoes from going to school. They might need to polish them up or something like that. Shift and overlap. That's kind of talking about how do the middle 50% overlap, and is one of them shifted higher. So in there I talk about, yep, the girls is middle 50% shifted higher, and I give some numbers to back that up. Doing so in context, so giving the dollar amount, and also talking about ball wear constantly throughout. And I just say this further goes to prove a point, and kind of give some other reasons for that. This might be the case as well. For instance, the reason I came up with is maybe there's more pressure on the girls and what they wear to the ball, whereas boys are just kind of expected to show up, and as long as they're dressed nice enough, that's okay. It's a bit of a generalization, but it's possibly a reason why. Interesting features. So in interesting features, we're looking for groupings or extreme values. So I'm going to give examples of both here. So we have a cluster or a grouping around $0 spent on the ball wear, and we also have an extreme value of a boy that spent $990 on ball wear. So a cluster of around 0, well, why might there be a cluster around 0? Well, maybe they have all the stuff they already need, or maybe they borrowed it. So they didn't need to spend anything on the ball, so that would explain why there's a cluster down there. Whereas an extreme value, maybe that person just went shopping and needed everything, and they did it at an expensive store, so hence why they spent more. So that's kind of the different features. Remember, you only need to discuss 3 of these. All the blue is kind of excellence level stuff. Then going on to the conclusion, this is where you firstly need to answer your question. You need to say whether you can or make, firstly, can you make the call, and about one being larger than the other. Now, looking back up the graph up the top here, you can see this median is outside this group's middle 50%, and this median is 200, which is outside this middle 50% here, because their lower quartile is 210. So both medians are outside each other's middle 50%. So we can make the call, which is awesome. So from my investigation, I can make the call. And now I just go to kind of repeat my question, but as an answer, that girls tend to spend more money on ball wear than boys' private high school ball. So it's important to include your population. If you don't include your population in your conclusion, straight away it's not achieved. So it's very important to include that. And then I go on to like the merity bit and give some evidence. So as previously discussed, the boxes do overlap, but both medians lie outside each other's middle 50%. So I'm just explaining that there. And then finally, the excellence part in the conclusion. There's a few things you can do for that. Firstly, you can talk about sampling variability. For instance, if I was to do this again, I'd get different but probably similar results. And mainly because, well, the situation hasn't changed that much. Yeah, like the ball's going to largely be the same. They'll probably still go shopping. Prices haven't changed. What people are wearing to the ball hasn't changed. And then another thing, so you could talk about that sampling variation. Another thing you could talk about is what you would do if you're doing another investigation to carry this on further. And so it'd actually be interesting to know whether or not they already had or borrowed items. So something they could investigate further. So maybe they had, or maybe they had a particularly expensive outfit and they used it again. And a way to improve this would be to look at, well, did they write that down as 0, or did they write down the original amount? We don't really know. There's not enough information there. So that's the third thing you can do. You can talk about sampling variation. You can talk about what you'd do if you further investigate this, and what could we do to improve that. So there's kind of 3 things you can include in there to kind of get your conclusion up to that excellence level. Yeah, hope that helps.